Okay, imagine this scenario. You're driving, it's late, maybe it's raining a little, and then suddenly, screeching tires, crunching metal, shattering glass.
Horrible
A
accident.
terrible accident.
Mm-hmm.
The car is completely totaled, but somehow you crawl out of the wreckage. You're standing there, heart just pounding. What's the very first thought that hits your mind?
Oh, for me, it's a checklist. Instantaneously, I'm doing a full body scan. Am I
Yeah.
bleeding? Is anything broken? What about the other driver? Pure damage assessment.
Exactly. That's the rational response, right? It's survival.
Mm-hmm.
But the source material we are covering today, it opens with that exact scene
Yeah.
to drop this bombshell on us.
Right. The author, Schweffing, he describes crawling out of a wreck just like that.
But his first thought, that instantaneous flash before any logic kicks in, it wasn't, am I heard? It was, God save me.
And that tiny split-second difference is the wedge we're going to drive into today. We're looking at a whole collection of essays from Schweffing written over, almost 20 years?
Yeah, and they all propose that we as humans are basically operating on the wrong software.
It's the rational mind versus the spiritual spark.
And I want to be really clear up front for everyone listening.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a deep dive into religion, not in the traditional sense. We're not here to preach.
No, not at all. It's more about this proposed ladder of thinking.
A ladder that, frankly, challenges the way we're all taught to process information, make decisions, view reality, really.
Right. We're trained to use data, weigh the pros and cons, use evidence. But this material argues that that very method, the one we use for everything from buying a car to choosing a career, is actually a prison.
A prison of wisdom. I just love that phrase, even if it hurts my brain a little.
It's a great phrase.
The idea that being smart is actually the trap. So let's unpack this. Schweffing breaks human existence down into 3 tiers. And spoiler alert, most of us are on the bottom.
Statistically, yeah. According to the source, about 80 to 85% of us are living what's called the mortal life.
The mortal life, it sounds a bit grim.
It does, but when you read the description, it's just normal life.
Right.
It's the life driven by tangible things. Money, food, status, fame, family obligations. It's the water we all swim in, the daily grind.
Okay, so that's the baseline. What's the next tier up?
That's the wise life. This is a much smaller group, maybe 5 to 10% of people.
And these are...
The philosophers, the reformers, the scientists, people driven by things like truth, kindness, creating a better society. They use rationality and logic to improve the world.
Which sounds fantastic. I mean, who doesn't want to be wise? In almost any other context, that would be the goal, right?
That would be the peak of the mountain. But the source says, no, even this isn't the top.
So what is?
The peak, the top 2 to 5%, is the spiritual life. And this is where it gets really fascinating, because the source says these people explicitly do not use wisdom or cleverness.
They abandon it.
They abandon it.
That's the part that really got me. We usually think of spiritual masters as being, super wise.
Oh.
Yeah, but Schweffing argues they're actually empty.
Empty, but in a very specific way. They have no reliance on nations, on leaders, on organized religion. They're described as seeds of heaven. They have a direct line to the greatest creator, and they bypass all the middle management of logic.
And the source uses Christian imagery to explain this, but with a bit of a twist, doesn't it?
It does. It brings up the narrow gate from the book of Matthew. The argument is that following Jesus' teachings is the path, but not for the sake of Christianity as an institution.
So what's the point then?
The point, according to the source, was that Jesus' sole mission was to get people to stop thinking and start trusting the Creator directly.
Okay, let's drill down on that. Thinking versus trusting. Because the core conflict here is rationality versus spirituality. And the source's attack on rationality is kind of brutal.
It is. We cherish our ability to reason. It's how we built our entire world.
Right. But the source defines rational thinking as being based on facts, logic, science.
The tools of the wise life.
And it argues that all of that is fundamentally fear-based.
Fear-based.
That seems harsh. I think of rationality as being level-headed.
Yeah. But think about it. Why do we plan? Why do we save money or look both ways before we cross the street?
To avoid bad things happening.
To avoid poverty. To avoid danger. Rationality is a defensive mechanism. It's always asking, how do I survive? It's scanning for threats.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah.
Whereas spiritual thinking.
Spiritual thinking is asking a totally different question. Where is my soul going? And the definition of it is, Well, it's radical. Spiritual thinking is actually no thinking.
That's a paradox.
Mm.
How can you think without thinking?
It's defined as acting immediately on the first impulse of the heart. The second you stop to analyze it, is this a good idea? What will people say?
Logic kicks in.
Logic kicks in, and according to the source, the spiritual connection is severed.
So it's about speed, about not hesitating.
It's about purity. The source sees logic as a kind of contamination. It's the interference of past experience. You touch a hot stove once, you learn not to do it again. That's rational. But spiritual thinking operates on a macroscopic level that just ignores those little micro-survival instincts.
The source gives some pretty wild examples to prove this.
Yeah.
And I have to say, if I actually followed this advice, my family would probably stage an intervention.
You're thinking about the job hunt scenario, I bet.
The job hunt, yes. Okay, so rational me is looking for a job. I'm checking the salary, the benefits, the commute, the 401k.
Of course. You're securing your survival. You're operating in that mortal or wise tier.
But the spiritual thinker,
They only ask two questions. Does this bring me joy? And
Yeah.
does this align with my path to heaven?
and if the answer is yes, they take it, even if it pays peanuts.
Exactly, because they aren't planning for retirement in this life.
Yeah.
They're navigating their path to their eternal life, capital L, life. They trust that if they follow that joy, the survival stuff will just get handled by the Creator.
Okay, but my favorite, or maybe the most anxiety-inducing example, was the visa application.
Oh, that one perfectly illustrates the no logic rule.
So the scenario is you feel a spiritual impulse to go to Canada. Rational me goes to the government website. It says you need 10 grand in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I look at my bank account. I have maybe $50. Rational conclusion. I can't go. I don't even apply.
A perfectly logical conclusion. You save yourself the application fee and the disappointment.
But the spiritual thinker,
The spiritual thinker feels the impulse. Go to Canada. They don't check the bank account. They don't read the requirements. They just apply.
that's terrifying.
It is. They trust that if the impulse is true, the Tao, the way, will open a path that logic can't even see.
It goes against everything we're taught about being a responsible adult.
To the rational mind, it's pure terror. But this brings us to the most crucial illustration in the texts, the parable of the house builder. This is where the source explains why this makes sense. It's not just a gamble, it's about accessing different data.
Right. So two people are building a house. The rational thinker builds it to last 30 years, stone foundation, reinforced steel. Smart.
Seems smart. It's the prudent thing to do.
The spiritual thinker builds a little shack out of light wood and glass. Says, it only needs to last for 2 years.
To the rational neighbor, this person looks insane or lazy, irresponsible.
Right. Why build something that won't last? But then comes the twist.
The earthquake. The source argues that the spiritual thinker, through that no-thinking channel, can access information that is totally unavailable to logic. They sensed, without a seismograph, without any data, that a massive earthquake was coming in 2 years.
So when the quake hits, the rational thinker's heavy, expensive house collapses on them.
And maybe kills them. Meanwhile, the spiritual thinker's light little house just falls over, they crawl out, dust themselves off, and they haven't wasted all those resources on something that was doomed from the start.
So the argument is that rationality is microscopic, what we can see and measure right now.
Yeah.
But spiritual thinking is macroscopic. It takes into account future events, destiny, things that aren't on the spreadsheet.
Precisely. It reminds me of that other little story in the notes about the mudslide.
Oh, yeah. A mudslide comes rushing down a hill and stops just before it hits a van.
And then, once the van is safely away, the mudslide continues down the hill.
Rationality calls that luck, a coincidence.
Or physics. Soil composition, whatever. But the source says, no. That is the Tao actively protecting someone with heaven's blessing. It's a completely different system of cause and effect. If you're aligned with the Tao, you don't need the stone house. The flow of events itself protects you.
Okay, so let's say our listener is intrigued. They want to try this. They want to tap into this earthquake predicting intuition. The source lays out a kind of how-to guide, right? The 8 conditions.
It does, and this is a really important point. It's not just about guessing or being impulsive. You can't just be lazy and call it spiritual. It requires a very rigorous internal environment. You have to achieve what it calls the zero state.
The 0 state.
Yeah.
Sounds like something out of science fiction.
It just means emptiness. Think of your mind as a radio receiver. All your rationality, your desires, your anxiety, that's all static.
And if the static is too loud, you can't hear the signal.
You can't hear the signal from the creator.
Right.
So one of the key conditions is no intention. You act without a specific purpose. You aren't doing X to get Y. You're just doing X because the impulse came.
Another one that really stood out to me was state of death.
That's a heavy one, yeah. It means living as if you've already surrendered everything. If you're already dead in that spiritual sense, you have no fear of loss.
You can't lose what you don't possess.
Which is another condition, possessing nothing, not controlling people or outcomes or things.
And authenticity. The source is incredibly strict about this.
Unbelievably strict, no falsehoods. The text says that even one tiny lie crumbles the entire spiritual edifice. The moment you lie, you're calculating. You're trying to manage perceptions.
That's rational work.
That's rational work. Spiritual work requires brutal, transparent honesty. Otherwise, the signal just cuts out.
It also mentions being in a flow state, never being in a hurry, letting relationships be these natural come-and-go things.
It paints a picture of a life that is just incredibly fluid. No grasping, no chasing, just responding.
It really feels like an evolution, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, we went from being cavemen to scientists, and this is the next step up.
Well, the source actually maps that out, and this was the part that, for me, gave the whole thing context. It explains why the author thinks this is all happening now.
Right, this is where we get into Lemuria and Atlantis.
Yeah.
Let's break down those eras, because they aren't just names. They represent different ways of thinking.
Exactly. So the text outlines 4 major eras. First, way back, 37,000 years ago, you have the Lemuria era. This was the era of sensibility.
Sensibility as in sensing things.
Precisely. Imagine early humans who were just deeply connected to nature emotionally. They could feel the weather change, feel animals nearby, but they couldn't explain it. No science, just feeling.
Okay, then what?
About 10,000 years ago, we entered the Atlantis era. This is the birth of the era of rationality.
So we start to categorize.
We start to categorize, build structures, organize societies, understand cause and effect. We moved from just feeling nature to trying to organize it.
And in the last 10,000 years, which is most of recorded history,
The source calls this the era of intellectuality. This is where we are now, or were. We went from understanding nature to knowing it, dissecting it.
the rise of complex science, law, putting everything under a microscope.
Exactly. But the source argues that as of 2013, that era is over.
And we're in a new phase now.
We are the Lifechanyuan era, the era of spirituality.
So are we just going back to feeling like the Lemurians?
It's not a regression. It's a synthesis, a spiral upwards. We aren't going back to being primitive. We're taking all the awareness we gained, but we're dropping the rigid logic to approach nature flexibly.
There's that beautiful analogy in the text with the flower that explains this.
Shakyamuni held a flower and Kashyapa smiled.
A classic Zen koan.
Right. The Buddha holds up a flower. He doesn't give a lecture on its botany or its color spectrum. He just holds it up. And one disciple, Kashyapa, just smiles.
He got it.
He got it. He understood the essence of the flower instantly, without words, without logic, without analysis. That direct download of information, that's the goal of this new spiritual era. No spreadsheet required.
The source also mentions a real-world prototype for this, a community called the Second Home.
Yes, Xiufeng claims they built this community where people live without locks on their doors, without conflict, as a kind of test lab for this era. Building beautiful things with no blueprints, just one person having a vision and everyone else flowing with it.
Which sounds like a total nightmare for a project manager.
For a rational project manager, yes. But he argues it worked because they simplified complexity. Rational thinkers take simple things and make them complex with committees and risk assessments. Spiritual thinkers take complex things and simplify them by just doing them, trusting the flow.
So what does this all mean for us, for the person listening who has a mortgage and relies on spreadsheets to do their job? We can't all just drop everything.
No, and the source isn't saying you have to, but it's a profound challenge to our modern definition of success. We are taught that control is the ultimate good. Control your finances, control your career, and rationality is the tool of control.
And this source is saying, let go of the controls.
It's saying control is an illusion anyway. You can build the strongest stone house, but you can't stop the earthquake. The real tension here is that rationality complicates life to ensure survival, while spirituality simplifies life to ensure eternal existence.
Even if you're not ready to give it all up, there is something really compelling about trusting that first impulse.
Absolutely. Think about the big decisions in your own life. How many times has your gut just screamed, no, but your brain talked you into it because the money was good or it looked good on paper?
And it ended badly.
It almost always ends badly. The brain can rationalize anything. The gut usually knows the real score.
So that's the wedge.
That's the wedge. That's where you can start to test this. You don't have to abandon logic completely to at least acknowledge that it often serves fear, while that first flash of intuition might be serving something bigger. You just have to listen to it for a second before you shout it down with arguments.
I want to leave everyone with a concept from the very end of the reading that I just loved. It's this idea of divine laziness.
Yes, the perfect antidote to hustle culture.
The source basically suggests that all our scheming and planning and worrying is exhausting and, frankly, kind of funny to the creator. You know that quote, "When humans make plans, God laughs."
It raises a great question. Imagine your life is a boat. And for years, you have been rowing as hard as you can upstream against the current because you think you know where you should go. You're steering, you're sweating, you're checking the map.
What happens if you just stop rowing?
Just lift the oars. Let the current take you. The rational mind will scream, "No! We'll crash into the rocks. We need to steer."
But the spiritual mind asks,
What if the river knows where the ocean is better than I do?
would you crash? Or would you end up at a destination far better than anything you could have ever planned for on your spreadsheet?
That is the gamble of the spiritual life.
Yeah.
And according to this source, it's the only way to actually get where you're truly meant to go.
Something to think about. Maybe the river knows the way. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.